Margaret stood at the kitchen sink, her hands moving slowly through the warm, soapy water. The bruises on her arms had faded to a dull purple now, less noticeable than they'd been last week. She'd learned to wear long sleeves even in summer. Behind her, she heard the familiar sound of the front door. Opening. Mr. Harrison was home from work. Margaret had been working as a housekeeper for the Harrison family for nearly 3 months now. It was good, honest work, the kind she needed desperately after leaving her marriage. The pay was fair, and Mr. Harrison was always polite, always respectful. He never raised his voice, never made her feel small. But there was something else about this house, something that made her heart ache every single day. His son, Tommy. The boy was 7 years old, with soft brown hair and eyes that seemed to hold an old soul. He would sit at the kitchen counter every afternoon watching her work, never saying a word, never making a sound. Mr. Harrison had explained it to her on her first day. "Tommy hasn't spoken since his mother passed away," he'd said quietly, his own pain visible in the lines around his eyes. "It's been 2 years now. The doctors say there's nothing physically wrong. He just chooses not to speak." Margaret understood silence. She'd lived in it for years. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Tommy took his usual spot at the counter. He had his coloring book spread out before him, his small hand moving the crayons across the page with careful precision. Margaret smiled at him gently. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," she said softly. "Is that a garden you're drawing?" Tommy didn't respond. He never did. But he looked up at her for just a moment, and Margaret saw something in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. She turned back to the cutting board, slicing vegetables for the evening meal. The knife slipped. "Oh!" she gasped, pulling her hand back. Blood welled up from the cut on her finger, bright red against her dark skin. Before she could reach for a towel, Tommy was there. He'd climbed down from his stool and was pulling her gently toward the sink. His small hands guided hers under the cool water. "It's all right, honey," Margaret said, touched by his concern. "It's just a little cut. I've had much worse." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Tommy looked up at her then. Really looked at her. His eyes moved from her face to her arms, where the sleeves had ridden up slightly, revealing the edges of those fading bruises. Margaret quickly pulled her sleeves down, but it was too late. Mr. Harrison came into the kitchen a few moments later. "Something smells wonderful," he said, loosening his tie. Then he noticed Tommy standing close to Margaret, still watching her with those serious eyes. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Margaret said quickly. "Just a small accident. Nothing to worry about." But Mr. Harrison had noticed something, too. His businessman's eye, so practiced at reading people and situations, caught the way Margaret held herself, the way she'd tugged at her sleeves, the slight wince when she reached for the towel. He didn't say anything, not then. But Margaret felt his gaze, gentle and concerned. The days passed quietly, as they always did. Margaret came each morning, cleaned, cooked, and cared for the beautiful home. She made sure Tommy had healthy meals and clean clothes. She never asked for anything more than what she was given. But Tommy had changed. He stayed closer to her now. When she folded laundry, he sat nearby, handing her clothespins. When she dusted the shelves, he followed behind with his small hands, trying to help. One afternoon, as they worked together in comfortable silence, Margaret began to hum. It was an old hymn her grandmother used to sing, something about grace and morning light. Tommy stopped what he was doing. He came and stood beside her, so close she could feel the warmth of his small body. "My grandmother used to sing that song," Margaret said softly. "She taught me that even in the darkest times, there's always a morning coming. Always light ahead." Tommy reached up and took her hand. Just held it. His grip was small but surprisingly strong. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. She squeezed back gently. It was a Thursday evening when everything changed. Mr. Harrison had come home early, which was unusual. Margaret was at the sink again, washing the dinner dishes. Tommy was at the counter, working on his homework. The phone rang. Margaret dried her hands and answered it. "Hello, Harrison residence?" The voice on the other end made her freeze. She recognized it immediately. Her ex-husband. Somehow he'd found her. "Don't you hang up on me," the voice growled. "You think you can just leave? Just walk away?" I know where you are now, Margaret. I'm coming to get what's mine. Margaret's hand trembled. The phone shook against her ear. I don't want any trouble, she whispered. Please, just leave me alone. You're my wife. You belong to me. I'm not. We're divorced. The papers don't mean anything. I'm coming for you. The line went dead. Margaret stood there, the phone still pressed to her ear, her whole body shaking. She didn't realize she was crying until she felt the wetness on her cheeks. Margaret? She turned. Mr. Harrison stood in the doorway, his face filled with concern. I'm sorry, she said quickly, wiping at her tears. I'm so sorry. I should go. I shouldn't have brought my problems here. What problems? His voice was gentle but firm. Margaret, talk to me. What's happening? Before she could answer, she felt something. A small hand slipping into hers. Tommy. He was looking up at her with those deep, knowing eyes. And then, slowly, he reached up and touched her arm, right where the bruises were hidden beneath her sleeve. And then, in the quiet kitchen, with the evening light streaming through the windows, Tommy spoke. His voice was small, rusty from disuse, but clear as a bell. Who hurt you, Mommy? The word hit Margaret like a physical force. Mommy, this beautiful child, who hadn't spoken in 2 years, had called her Mommy. Mr. Harrison's face went pale. He looked at his son, then at Margaret, and understanding flooded his features. Tommy, he whispered. But Tommy wasn't done. He looked at his father now, still holding Margaret's hand. Daddy, don't let anyone hurt Mommy again. Margaret sank to her knees, pulling the boy into her arms. She wept openly now, unable to hold back the flood of emotions. Relief, fear, gratitude, love, it all poured out of her. Mr. Harrison knelt beside them both. No one's going to hurt her, he said firmly, looking at his son, then at Margaret. I promise you, both of you. That night, after Tommy had finally gone to bed, Mr. Harrison and Margaret sat in the living room. She told him everything. About her marriage, the abuse, the fear, about finding the courage to leave and the constant worry that she'd be found. He listened without judgment. Without pity, just listened. You're safe here, he said finally. I'll make sure of it. Tomorrow we're going to see my attorney. We'll get a restraining order. And Margaret, he paused, his voice thick with emotion. You're not just the housekeeper to us. Tommy spoke for the first time in 2 years because of you. Because he loves you. Because he sees you as a mother, Margaret finished softly. Yes, they sat in silence for a long moment. He lost his mother, Margaret said quietly. And I lost the child I never had. Maybe we found each other for a reason. Mr. Harrison smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him. Maybe we all found each other. The months that followed brought change. Good change. Mr. Harrison kept his word. The restraining order was filed. Security measures were put in place. Margaret felt safer than she had in years. Tommy spoke more each day. Simple words at first, then sentences. He called Margaret Mommy naturally now, and she'd stopped correcting him. It felt right. And Mr. Harrison? He'd become more than an employer. He'd become a friend, a protector, someone who saw her as a person of value and dignity. One evening, as the three of them sat together at dinner, Tommy looked up from his plate. Daddy, he said. Yes, son? Can Margaret stay forever? Mr. Harrison looked at Margaret. She looked back. There was something in his eyes she'd never seen before, something tender and hopeful. I'd like that, he said softly. If she'd like that too. Margaret felt her heart swell. She looked at Tommy, at his sweet face and hopeful eyes. Then at Mr. Harrison, at the kindness and strength she saw there. Yes, she whispered. I'd like that very much. Tommy smiled. A real, genuine, beautiful smile. And in that moment, Margaret understood something profound. Sometimes families aren't born. Sometimes they're built, piece by piece, with kindness and patience and love. Sometimes broken people find each other, and in the finding they become whole.